Okay, so thank you all for being here. And as you can see from the title, we're going to talk about automatic speech recognition, specifically for low resource domains, with a focus on classroom speech as a case study. So if we were to define the thesis statement and the problem statement that we have, for specific low resource settings, and what we mean by low resource is severe data scarcity. So we don't have enough data to adjust our model. So we're operating under severe data scarcity, but a specific type of low resource domains, which are low resource domains under adverse acoustic conditions. So we're not talking about low resource languages where the linguistic syntax differs. We're talking about domains under standard American English where we also don't have enough data. But the distinguishing characteristic of these domains is the adverse acoustic conditions. What we propose in this dissertation is that we can achieve robust automatic speech recognition via a combination of training-centric strategies like continued pre-training and weekly supervised pre-training, as well as data-centric strategies like data simulation. So we mentioned that we talk about classrooms as a case study. So first off, what motivates us to look at classroom ASR? Well, classroom ASR is very important for any AI application that hopes to deploy within the classroom. So the larger project, which this research is a part of, is called Empowering Teachers. This project aims to deploy automated feedback systems for teachers within the classroom. And a major component of any pipeline that it is deployed to the classroom is a robust automatic speech recognition that will provide us with transcriptions of the classroom interactions, which will be later analyzed to provide feedback to teachers. But beyond that, robust automatic speech recognition can be a great accessibility tool for students who are hard of hearing or English language learners if it provides them with transcripts for the classrooms. So this is why classroom ASR is important. But why is it challenging? Why can't we use just off-the-shelf ASR models? So classroom ASR is challenging because classroom ASR, even within standard American English, is distinct from any off-the-shelf public access data set which off-the-shelf models are trained on. So classrooms are characterized by the presence of noise, and noise robustness in ASR is an open area of research. However, the noise within the classroom in itself is unique. So we have babble noise. Babble noise is the noise that is coming from multiple overlapping speakers that are speaking in the background of the target speaker. But within classroom, it is child babble noise, which is even less studied than babble noise and more challenging. In terms of the acoustics, we have diverse room acoustics that are a result of the diverse rooms where classrooms are. So you have different classrooms with different sizes, with different environmental noises. So all of this will result in diverse room impulse responses. We also have far field speech, where the microphone is not near the target speaker, which in and of itself is an open area of research in automatic speech recognition. We also have overlapping speakers, where we have multiple target speakers speaking at the same time, and we want to transcribe all of their speech. So all of this complicates the room acoustics. Finally, we have also a significant component of child speech. Prior research, including our own, shows that child speech is a challenging task for ASR systems, and off-the-shelf ASR systems really struggle with child speech, specifically because children differ acoustically from adults, but also differ linguistically from adults, and they have variability within each other. Add to that we also have, like what we alluded to earlier, we have severe data limitation. So if we were to estimate the amount of adult English data sets that are, and we even like imposing a lot of restrictions on this figure, these are public access data sets, open source data sets, for adult English data set, adult English without any noise, we will have a figure closer to 10,000 hours, in the range of 10,000 hours. If we were also to include proprietary data sets and other kinds of languages, it can like reach the millions of hours. But the totality of the high quality transcribed data within the classrooms is 13 hours. So ASR systems have been able to achieve human level performance under ideal conditions using tens of thousands of hours of data, of transcribed data. how can we achieve a robust performance using 13 hours of data? So the first trick that we use, which is the oldest trick in the book for low resource ASR, is to use a pre-trained ASR model. But the specific kind that we based our research on is called wave-to-vec model. So wave-to-vec is an ASR model, but it's more than that. It starts its life as a speech embedding model. Similar to how large language models first are trained by just self-supervised training on the totality of the text in the internet, these models learn by predicting the masked token or the next token. Wave-to-vec does something very similar, where we do masked speech token contrastive learning to first learn speech embeddings without any labels. So the model first starts as a speech embedding model, trains on tens of thousands of hours of data, or hundreds of thousands of hours of data, because you have less restriction on the data, because you don't need any transcription. And then for the second stage, you do supervised fine-tuning using your labeled data. Now, this is great news for us, because even though we have 13 hours of labeled data, we have about 5,000 hours of unlabeled data. So it gives us more opportunity to use the unlabeled data that we have. Another reason why this is an attractive option is that research shows that wave-to-vec is able to generalize well under low resources, because it already has seen a lot of data, just not transcribed. The details of wave-to-vec and how it trains is really beyond the scope of this dissertation, but it's important to know that it can learn without any labels, and it can learn with labels as well. Okay, so what about the data that we have? So the main corpus that we work with is called the NCTE corpus. So the NCTE corpus is a collection of 4th and 5th grade math classrooms that are collected within the United States. It captures the demographic diversity of the United States, and it also captures a lot of acoustic diversity within regular United States classrooms. The totality of the hours is 5,200 hours with weak transcriptions. So about 5,000 hours of these have weak transcriptions, but we argue that these transcriptions are not suitable for ASR training. And we're going to see in a minute why. So we have weak transcriptions for about 5,000 hours of those, and we have gold standard transcription for 13 hours that come from 17 classes. So why are the weak transcripts not available? Why do we consider that we only have 13 hours of transcriptions? So let's see. So this is an excerpt from the NCTE weak transcriptions, and we've highlighted all the inaccuracies in this transcription to really show what the issue is. So the first issue is that every name in this transcription was de-identified. So Emily becomes student E, Haley becomes student H, so on and so forth. Now, why is that? Because these transcripts were not intended for ASR. They were intended to analyze classroom interaction, and they wanted to preserve students' privacy. For that reason, it doesn't matter whether the student is Emily or any other E name. It just matters that we can identify the student, but the name doesn't matter, so they remove the names. Another issue, which is a bigger issue, is that the timestamps are highly inaccurate. So they were like giving really general rough timestamps. In this particular instance, they provided timestamp.
Human labeled data?
Human labeled data. It's 1 minute, but it's actually 42 seconds. So if we were to cut here, we would include much more speech than it is in the text. And another issue is that we also have substitution errors. So we see here that I needed to turn, the teacher said I needed to completely turn around while we're working. The transcription says a little. And then we have deletion errors. So we're missing here, like, let's turn to page 53. The teacher said doubling and halving. It's not in the transcription. Interjections like all right, okay, and are not there. And we also noticed that if there is a side conversation that is happening, the teacher is speaking to the teacher's aide, for example, it's labeled as a side conversation and is not transcribed. So we actually have a lot of deletion errors, and this is the most common error in this transcription. We have organic deletion errors like these errors, and we also have deletion errors that are a result of the inaccurate timestamps. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this data, and let's define 3 data sets that we can extract from this data set. The first data set that we extract is called NCTE unlabeled. This is if we throw away all the transcripts and just consider the audio. It's about 5,200 hours of audio without any labels. We call this data NCTE unlabeled. And then, if we consider the weak transcripts, and we're going to figure out a way to use them anyway, we have about 5,000 hours. We take 90% of that for training, and then 10% of that for validation. And then we actually retranscribed 17 classes, and we have 13 hours. This is the figure that we mentioned earlier. These are gold standard transcriptions that are highly accurate with little to no mistakes in the transcription. We take 10 hours of that for training and 3 hours for testing. 10 hours are from 14 classes, and then 3 hours are from 3 classes. Okay, so before we begin our experiments, let's define a baseline. Now, this baseline is based on how wave-to-vec is usually used. So if one was prior to our research, if one was to utilize wave-to-vec for low-resource research, we will say that the wave-to-vec paper says that we actually can generalize well under low resources, provided that you take our initial pre-trained model, that is not yet an ASR model, this is a speech embedding model, and then you fine-tune it on in-domain labeled data. Now, this bullseye here is a pretty good bullseye, but it doesn't match our domain. These are out-of-domain. This was pre-trained on out-of-domain unlabeled data, audiobooks, phone conversations. So it's still in standard American English, but it does not match the acoustics of classrooms. And this in-domain labeled data is from classrooms with highly accurate domains, highly accurate transcriptions. So our first contribution to this pipeline, we call it continued pre-training. And we published this in ICASP of last year. What continued pre-training does is that we take this model that was already pre-trained, and then we adapt the acoustic embedding model without any labels using continued pre-training. What we mean by that is that we perform more self-supervised learning using our in-domain unlabeled data. So we're fixing the bullseye to be something that is within the domain, but without any labels yet. We adapt the acoustic model that acts as initialization for the ASR model, and then we do the fine-tuning using our in-domain labeled data. Our second so first off, continued pre-training has been used, but for low-resource languages. For example, for Indic languages, you would first train on a high-resource language that has a lot of data, and then you will have a neighboring language that shares a lot of the sounds, and then they'll do continued pre-training on that, and then they'll do the fine-tuning. We were the first to use it within standard American English to do domain adaptation within standard American English, but just acoustic domain adaptation, not linguistic domain adaptation. The second contribution is weekly supervised pre-training. Now, weekly supervised pre-training lives within the domain of weekly supervised learning. Weekly supervised learning is a domain within machine learning where the labels are inaccurate or imprecise. Now, there is a very well-known ASR model called Whisper. Now, Whisper trained on web scale data, so data scoured from the internet, and they knew that the data was inaccurate. They did some filtering. They knew that maybe 60% of the data was accurate and then 40% was inaccurate. What they did was just, because the data is too big, just let's train the model on the entire data set, and then the model would implicitly denoise. This doesn't apply to us, and we'll see exactly why, because our data is highly inaccurate, and the percentage is not that. We have 13 hours of accurate data, and then we have 5,000 hours of inaccurate data. So this paradigm, as is, doesn't work. What we propose is we have weekly supervised pre-training, which is similar to supervised fine-tuning. We train this model on the inaccurate data, and then we do the in-domain fine-tuning. Okay, so how does this work? So let's look at the results. Actually, before we look at the results, it's the initial pre-training amount of data is 65,000 hours. The continued pre-training on in-domain unlabeled data is about 5,000 hours. Similarly, the weekly supervised pre-training, and then the supervised fine-tuning is 10 hours. This refers to the amount of training data. Okay, so these are the results. The results are in word error rate. The word error rate is an ASR error metric that measures the inaccuracies within the transcription, substitutions, insertions, and deletions. And first, let's look at the baseline, and let's try to put these numbers in context. So the model in blue is the baseline. This is the model that is based on the off-the-shelf wave-to-vec model. And then the models in orange are all models that have undergone continued pre-training, or CPT, but based on different supervised fine-tuning data, and we'll get to that in a minute. If we take the off-the-shelf wave-to-vec model and then train it on NCTE Gold, which is the 10 hours of accurate data, we get 28%. Now, is that a good number? Is that a bad number? Well, on audiobooks in Standard American English with adult data, the word error rate is 2 to 3%. Now, this is maybe a pretty good number, but we want the number to be about 10% or below 10% to be considered for production. 28% is not great. Okay, so this model has not undergone continued pre-training or CPT, has not undergone weak supervision. It's just an off-the-shelf model that has undergone supervised fine-tuning. So what if we take that model, but we do continued pre-training on it, and then fine-tune it on the supervised fine-tuning directly? Well, the word error rate shrinks from 28% to 17.79%. So about a 10% absolute reduction in performance. Now, to put into the perspective, these two models have seen the exact same amount of labeled data. The only difference is that we use the trick that Wave2Vec allows us to do a self-supervised domain adaptation with continued pre-training using the unlabeled data, and then we got all of this free performance, free in the meaning that we didn't need to spend any money transcribing the data. We collected a lot of data, and then the same amount of labeled data that we have, we get 10% improvement in performance. Okay, so what if I say that actually no, we have 13 hours of accurate data, but I know that in weekly supervised training, if you have a large enough training data that is weekly supervised, you get good performance. We've seen this in Whisper. So let's do that. Let's take the model, do continued pre-training on it, but only use weak supervision. So if we take that model and train it, we get a 32% word error rate. 32%. That is worse than training the baseline. Now, why is that? And how exactly that happens, we'll show in a minute. Suffice to say that we know that the model has learned some useful representations, but it also has learned a lot of the noise that exists within the training data. So training here is useful as long as it is an intermediate step. So let's consider it as that and take that model and then train it on the NCTE Gold data. So this is the same model, but we're doing fine-tuning using the accurate data. I will get a performance of 13.5%. That is better. So for example, first off, training on the 10 hours of data after training on 5,000 hours of weak data, the word error rate shrinks by more than half. And it is better than training directly on NCTE Gold. So this intermediate training is not just introducing noise. It is introducing some useful representations that make this model a useful foundational model or a useful initial model for fine-tuning later. And this is our best performing model at 13.51%. It is close to the figure that we want. It's not there yet. We want generally to be like about 7 to 8%. Okay, so to understand why the weak training helps, let's look at the qualitative example. So this is a reference from the NCTE Gold test set. This is a reference that we know is highly accurate, and I actually gone ahead and also verified that it is accurate. So let's look at the transcription when we just train on NCTE week. So first off, without me highlighting any parts of the transcription, we can know one thing. This is much, much shorter than the reference. We can just look at the number of words or number of lines. This is less than half. So, okay, so the model is skipping a lot, right? But let's highlight what the model got right. Almost everything that the model attempted to transcribe, it transcribed with high accuracy. So 33, you are right, yours is correct, is transcribed correctly. And then the model skipped all of that, transcribed the number 54, and then skipped the word faithful, which is a name. Because remember, we don't have any names in the data. And then you have to stay here, is transcribed correctly, and then there's a little bit of gibberish at the end. But this is significant because the model learns useful representations, but it learns from the deletion errors in the data to seemingly randomly skip parts of the transcription. Is there a pattern? We haven't been able to find any pattern. It seems to be random, that the model just, there's no like changes in the level of the noise. It's not teacher versus student speech. It seems to be random that the model will just skip parts because acoustically, the deletions are random because they're happening due to timestamp errors or due to side conversations.
This is all single channel, right?
Single channel, yes. Okay, so let's look at training directly on NCTE Gold because this is the model to beat, right? This is all of this with continued pre-training. We see that the model does not skip anything. It's a pretty good word counter, right? It transcribes everything, but there are some issues because it doesn't skip anything because there are no deletion errors on the data, no significant deletion errors on the data, but there are some issues because the data set is small. So OK, I1 cleanup is transcribed as K, on1 cleanup is misspelled, seed is misspelled, and faithful is misspelled as faithful. OK, so let's try to get the best of both worlds. Let's take this model, fine-tune it on this data, and see what happens. OK, so immediately you see that the number of words here is significantly more than the number of words here, right? And if we highlight, we see that it combined the best of both worlds. Almost everything that this model attempted to transcribe is correct, with only one issue, I1 being transcribed as on1. It did not skip the name, but it did not also mistranscribe it. So we got the pretty good transcription quality from here, and we got rid of the deletion errors by training here. So what seems to happen is that the model learned a lot from this weak data, but it also learned a lot of noise from the transcription. And then when we take that and fine-tune and accurate data, we denoise the model again, and we get a good performance. OK, so how do we scale beyond that? The issue that we have is that we've shown that the model can really learn. There are no limitations within the architecture of the model to learn on child speech or classroom speech. The issue is that we don't have enough data. Because when we introduce data with smart adaptation methods, the model improves significantly. We got from 28% to 13%. So the next frontier is just to get more data, right? Well, the issue is there is a cost of scaling. So to put it into perspective, just transcribing these 13 hours of data from the NCTE data took about a year and cost thousands of dollars. The cost of transcription is about $3 to $5 per minute. So there is a cost of scaling. Scaling is not really feasible. We also, like, if we wanted to do any, so part of the project that we wanted to do is that we wanted to see how the model would perform under different demographics, for example. Well, you don't really have an apples-to-apples comparison. If you have one classroom with majority-minority groups and one classroom without majority-minority groups, it's not apples-to-apples. So if you wanted to do this diversity, you can't really control what is in the classroom. We also have uncontrolled noise levels. So if we wanted to have SNR, for example, analysis to see how the performance changes with the SNR, or we wanted to train speech enhancement models where we cancel out the noise, we can't do that. And the biggest issue is that there is restricted data shareability. So we're not pretending that there's only, in totality, 13 hours of high-quality transcribed data in classrooms in the world. This is just the data that we have access to. We transcribe this data. We're not allowed to share it with anybody else. Other people have transcribed data, and they're not allowed to share it with us because school districts really put restrictions on sharing the audio. So there is an issue here in the reproducibility of research. So this is why, this is the motivation for the second project in this presentation, which is RealClass. It's a scalable and shareable classroom speech data set via simulation. So we want to design a data set ourselves with certain design goals. We want this data to be scalable, realistic, and shareable. We want it to be able to scale this data easily and cheaply. We want it to be realistic to the classrooms. And we want to be able to share it. We want to have clean and noisy pairs, so we can train speech enhancement models. We can control the SNR in the classroom. So we have the clean speech, and then we can add the noise later. We want to enable reproducible research by making this data public access as much as we can. We do that by using already public and shareable data sets, and this data set becomes a derivative of that, so we can likewise share it. So the outputs of this project are 3 complementary artifacts. First is what we call RealClass Clean. It is a classroom interaction data set between adults and children in complete absence of noise. And then we have a room acoustics component, which is children babble noise and room impulse responses that are created via simulation to mimic realistic classroom conditions. And we also have the simulation software package. So we can share each part of that, each artifact separately with different levels of shareability. Now I want to stress that I'm saying here simulation. I'm not saying synthetic data. We're not using any Gen AI. All the speech in this data set is natural human speech. Gen AI is used a lot in ASR right now. A lot of models trained, like use TTS systems to get more data. This has limited usability with children. And frankly, we just didn't want to venture into creating TTS systems for children. So we're using real children data, we're using real adult data. Okay, so how did we create RealClass Clean first, right? So RealClass Clean is a combination of 2 or 3 data sets depending on how you define it. The first data set, which is the easier to define, is the MyScience Tutor data set. The MyScience Tutor data set is the largest children data set corpus that is shareable under data use agreement. We actually have contributed significantly to this data set by defining certain benchmarks, and also contributed by cleaning up this data set from a mistranscription. So this is a children speech data set from virtual tutoring session. So it is within STEM, and it is educational. For the adult,
describe a little bit about the data set. What is it's taking the material from Khan Academy or OpenCourseware? And
so this is for the adult data, but for the children data, we're just using MyScience Tutor. For adult data, we're using MIT OpenCourseware and Khan Academy. Now, Khan Academy is a very good choice here, right? Because we have a lot of data from elementary school mathematics and science. But the issue with Khan Academy is that the majority of it is from a single speaker. So that would not have the diversity that we want.
The teacher, right?
It's the same, yeah, it's the same guy. It's like Khan something, yeah. So it's one guy. And it's not recorded in classrooms, it's recorded on a tablet, but it has pretty clear audio, pretty high quality transcriptions. So these data are sourced from YouTube. So these have high quality human transcriptions. And the way that we made sure that it is actually human transcriptions, not other ASR systems, is that we looked at older videos before any ASR models were available, right? So this is Khan Academy, but Khan Academy, it's small, and it's one person. So we complemented Khan Academy with MIT OpenCourseware. MIT OpenCourseware is a YouTube channel that has a lot of recordings from MIT. These are graduate level courses or undergrad courses. It's not really a perfect match for elementary school mathematics, but we picked courses that are like linear algebra or calculus, which will have a lot of linguistic overlap. And the most important thing here is the acoustics. What we keep finding in our research is that the acoustics of the classroom is really the bottleneck. So MIT OpenCourseware captures the acoustics. It's instructional speech, which is one person speaking into a room. So it has the same tone of voice that we find in classrooms. Now we match them together. We're not just training on both of them. We're not concatenating the 2 data sets. We're actually doing something smarter, which we're doing semantic matching. So what do we mean by semantic matching? We put all the transcriptions of MIT OpenCourseware and Khan Academy in one column, A, and then we put all the transcriptions from MyScience Tutor in column B. We process all the text using sentence transformers. Sentence transformers are specific kinds of language models that produce text embeddings based on the semantics of the sentence. What I mean by that is, if I have 2 text utterances, they're talking about Mount Everest, for example, they will be closer in the embedding space than one utterance and another utterance that are talking about a movie that I saw, or even like science or mathematics. So within the embedding space, the distances are meaningful. So what we do is we match utterances from column A to utterances from column B, adult to child, based on the semantic distance. And what we find was, it actually looks like they're talking in the same conversation. So this is an example that we have. So the adult says, what flows in the opposite direction? And then the child speech says, it flows to the positive end, to the negative end. So the sentence transformer was able to discern that this is talking about electricity. We also do some other tricks. So for example, we have random overlap. So the handoff between the adult speech and child speech, we sometimes have like half a second or a second of overlap, which happens in natural conversations. We also have some random silences, just to make this data sound more natural. So this is RealClass Clean. I just wanted to make sure that the professors in the Zoom room can hear as well. Is there any issue with the audio? Okay.
I can hear you. Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can hear you well. Thank you. Enjoying the talk. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. The other artifact that we mentioned is the classroom noise and the room impulse response. We're really going to talk here about the noise itself. The room impulse response follows in a very similar fashion. So for the room acoustics, we recreate the classrooms within the virtual environment within game engines. Now, why did we do that? Well, actually, this project started in this very conference room. What I wanted is, I wanted to create a children babble noise. We knew that a large portion of the My Science Studio data set is untranscribed, so we cannot really use it for supervised training. So I checked out a couple of laptops, and I placed them around the room. I placed a microphone around here, and then I tried to record. This was really painful, and it actually did not result in any usable data. It took me like a week. The issue is that we need a lot of devices, so this is not scalable. There's a lot of variables because, for example, I recorded for a weekend, and then I forgot to tune the microphone to a certain level. And I needed to book the conference room and all of that, and then so the scalability was really limited. So what I really wanted to do is that I wanted to move to the virtual environment, which allows me much more scalability, and I only need one device. Now, is the virtual environment within the game engine a good match? The answer is yes. So game engines are software that are used to create video games. And for video games, you need high graphical fidelity, but the graphical fidelity is limited by the technology and the rendering. So we also need high acoustic fidelity, which is actually very possible. And they achieve this high acoustic fidelity through a number of plugins. One of them is called acoustic geometry. So what we do is that we define the acoustic properties of wood via absorption, transmission, or scattering. And then we assign it to a chair, and then it's warped based on the chair geometry. And then we have actual acoustic waves traveling within the room, and then they interact with each artifact in the room based on the acoustic material and the geometry. So we do that for the floor, we do that for the chair, the ceiling, the glass, everything.
Which plugin?
It's called the Steam audio plugin. Yeah. We also do something that we cannot, there are things that we can do here that we cannot do in the real rooms. For example, in this example, we have 9 children. So each part here is an audio source or a speaker. So for this example, we have 9 students. In the actual example, we have 25. So this would require 25 laptops, for example, playing 25 tracks. We only do this here in one device. We have random room noises, for example, random door noises that play at random intervals. We have whiteboard noises, we have chair noises, we have ambient noises. All of that is really limited if you wanted to do it in a real conference room. So we use this to create to the best of our knowledge, the first children babble noise data set that are specifically for classrooms. And we also use the same plugin and the same tool for room impulse response calculation. We use the exponential sinusoid to play an exponential sinusoid in the room and record it, and then we deconvolve it to get the room impulse response. So how does this perform first? So these are the results. These are all continued pre-training model that are trained directly on the RealClass noisy data set, a combination of the RealClass noisy data set plus NCTE Gold and NCTE Gold. And what I mean by RealClass noisy, it's the RealClass clean data set that is added to the noise at different SNRs, varying from -5 dB to 10 dB. Okay, and this is our baseline here, right? This is the CPT model trained directly on NCTE Gold. The performance was 17.78%. Now, first off, training on NCTE noisy gets us a word error rate when testing on the NCTE Gold test set at about 23.5%. Now, this doesn't yet match NCTE Gold, but it is close enough that we consider it a suitable replacement for real classroom data if you don't have any classroom data at all. So we're using the CPT model because our CPT model is open access and is available in Hugging Face. So if we cannot share NCTE Gold with anybody, perhaps we can share the RealClass data set, we can share the model checkpoint, and then they can do the training themselves. We'll get a word error rate of 23.5. However, if we actually have the NCTE Gold data, and we combine it with the RealClass noisy training set, we get a word error rate of 16.97%. So not only is this data set a good analog to the real classroom data, it is also a good complement to the real classroom data. We can add it together and we get better performance. So this shows that at least to the model, this data sounds close enough to the real classroom data that it achieves good benchmarks. But is this the real impact of the data? Well, for this version, no, because we don't really match the performance yet, right? Perhaps in subsequent versions we can, but the real impact is we achieve our design goals, right?
Sorry about
It's okay. We achieve our design goals. We call our design goals. We now have a scalable, realistic, and shareable data set. The simulation software is really lightweight and can run on any device. We have clean and noisy pairs. We are enabling reproducible research. And the data set is public and shareable. And something that we don't really show here is that the test set actually tracks the NCT equal test set pretty well. If a model does well or better on the NCT, the RealClass test set, it means that it does well on the NCT equal test set.
How did you get children voices?
It's from the My Science Tutor dataset.
Okay.
Yeah, so the My Science dataset has a transcribed portion that we use in RealClass Clean, and it has untranscribed portion that we use in the babble noise. So the impact that we have is in versatility and not in performance. So there is already an impact of this data set. So this data set is used for community benchmarking already. The noise corpus is used in a competition right now that is hosted by Driven Data and is funded by the Melinda Gates Foundation as a test set that people can benchmark their models on. We are planning at least the RealClass Clean to be public access release, and then the noise corpus to be controlled access release controlled by UMD. And we're also planning to release a simulation software because we believe that the simulation software has implications and has uses outside of the classroom. So if you want to create a speech model for hospital environments or for car environments, you can use the same software to recreate the acoustics within the software.
Where do you control the access?
This is part of the IP process at UMD. This is, and like the noise itself, they determined that there's IP that they wanted to protect. Another impact that we have is that we are allowing more experimentation. Now, I'm not going to delve into the numbers here, but using this data set, there are other experiments that we can do within classrooms that we couldn't do before. For example, this is speech enhancement. There's like this table is the off-the-shelf model, and this table with fine-tuned on RealClass. So we can do speech enhancement on classrooms, and we can actually find a tangible improvement in performance if you use the speech enhancement model that is developed on RealClass data and deployed on the NCT gold data. And we can do SNR analysis. We can vary the SNR at the test set from -5 dB to 15 dB, and then we can see how the word error rate improve as the SNR increases, and we can do more analysis on that. Now, the point here is not to discuss these numbers. The point here is to know that these things are now possible that wasn't possible before we've developed the RealClass data. Okay. The last part of this presentation, we want to talk about basically the elephant in any room since 2022, which is LLMs, and how they can fit into this research and how they fit into ASR. Now, there is a recent shift in ASR where initially we had speech native ASR models like Wave2Vec. The models were trained end-to-end for ASR. We have like something like Wave2Vec, which is a speech-specific architecture that is first trained as a speech embedding model. It is optimized for acoustic modeling, and it's basically a big encoder with a small decoder that only is trained on speech. Now, the paradigm shift that happened is that now we have LLM-based ASR. Now, what LLM-based ASR does is that it adapts general-purpose LLMs for ASR. It's usually a speech encoder hooked to a much, much bigger LLM decoder that acts as the brain. We usually have multimodal pre-training. The model is first trained as an LLM for text only, and then you have multimodal pre-training using text, audio, and sometimes vision. Now, these models are characterized by very strong linguistic modeling because you have the LLM as the linguistic brain. And the key benefit of these models is that we can do contextual biasing, which we're going to describe exactly what contextual biasing is, but we also have world knowledge that improves the performance. So you have a speech encoder hooked up to an LLM decoder, and the important thing here is that we have linguistic modeling. Now, the question that we have here is that can the LLM-based ASR outperform speech native models in acoustically adverse conditions? So again, we're not talking about low resource languages. We're talking about low resource domains within the English language. So the linguistics are not the problem. The acoustics are the problem. But can the sheer size and the scale of the training of the LLM just make this doesn't matter, and we can just use an LLM and forget about everything that we're doing? So let's first look at how the how we can do ASR with multimodal LLMs. So the way that it works is that we first have an LLM backbone. This is first trained as an LLM. And then we give it audio understanding capabilities. We do that by hooking up an audio encoder, for example, wave-to-vec. We add a connector that the purpose of this connector is to adapt the audio embeddings to embeddings that the LLM can understand. And then we train this model end-to-end. And it's usually trained on a variety of tasks. So it actually sees even more speech data than we can do in ASR. So sometimes it's diarization, sometimes it's audio question answering. But for audio, you can, at the text prompt, you can say, please transcribe this audio into text, and then the LLM transcribed it. Now, what contextual biasing allows us to do is that contextual biasing allows us to add more metadata that is beyond the audio signal into the transcriber that we can't do with other models. Now, contextual biasing technically is possible with wave-to-vec models, but it's very complicated. It's too complicated that most people don't use it. But with LLMs, you can do it in a native way. For example, here, we can give it the same audio, but instead of saying transcribe this audio into text, we tell it information about the audio. So this is an audiobook. And so for story set in the 18th century, and these are the character names. So what this happens is that when we add the text prompt, we're basically conditioning the output on the text prompt. So if you add context into the condition, the probability system entirely changes, and you're giving more probability to, for example, terms that are common in audiobooks or 18th century terms. The word Charles here has more probability than Carl, for example, even under acoustic ambiguity. So this has been shown to improve the performance. And this is really attractive to use in classrooms, because in classrooms we have natural text context. For example, we have the lesson plan, we have the student list, and something that we have noticed is that something that the model really struggles with is student names. So if you can give it all the student names, it gives more probability to less common names. This can help. So the research question is, how does contextual biasing affect the performance? And how does it compare to fine-tuning? Again, remember, we're still operating under limited resources. And we are considering that some people want to develop ASR models for classrooms that perhaps don't have any data from classrooms. So can contextual biasing actually work as well as fine-tuning? This is the question that we're asking. And the other question that we're asking is, how does the models with strong linguistic modeling, like LLM-ASR, compare to the CPT, weakly supervised pre-training wave-to-vec model, which is our best performing model, with strong acoustic modeling? And another way to ask this question is, what matters more for acoustically adverse conditions within the standard American English? Strong acoustic models or strong linguistic models that are orders of magnitude bigger? So this is how we run our experiments. So we run our experiments on Qwen-Omni 2.5, which is an open source multimodal LLM developed by Alibaba. And for contextual biasing, we generate context from NCTE transcripts using GPT-4o. So we basically tell GPT, given this ground truth transcript of classrooms, give us a context that we can feed into an LLM for contextual biasing, include topic, short lesson plan, and names of student. And then this is an example of what GPT gives us. Now, a danger of this is that it might leak some of the transcription, but we verify that there's no leakage that's happening. So this basically gives us a lesson plan based on the transcript and all the student names. For fine-tuning experiments, we fine-tune on a combination of the RealClass data and the NCTE gold data set. And these are the results. Now, the blue models are the wave-to-vec models, and the orange models are the Qwen-Omni model. So let's ignore the wave-to-vec models for a minute, and let's look at the performance.
What was the backbone LLM you used?
It's Qwen.
Oh,
Qwen. Yeah. It has like a 2.5. There is a Qwen-ASR that's out there. The Qwen-ASR model allows contextual biasing, but it's not open access. It's not open weights. It's just via API, and we cannot really use the API with protected data.
Qwen 7 billion? Or
7 billion, yes. So this is a good point. The orange model is 7 billion parameters. Wave-to-vec is 300 million. So it's more than 20, it's more than an order of magnitude bigger, right? So this really puts the numbers into perspective. So if we just take the off-the-shelf Qwen-Omni model, and just tell it, transcribe this audio into English. And by the way, when we say transcribe audio into English, we're doing linguistic biasing, right? We're biasing this into English. The performance is 33.2%. Now, this is why I'm putting this model here. This is our baseline. This is the first model that we've seen. Wave to back, just train it. It's 28%. This model is worse. Because it's such a large model that's trained on such a huge variety of data sets, none of these are classroom data sets, which makes it generalize worse on a different domain of classrooms. And another reason for this number is sometimes the LLM is stubborn. It will say, OK, sure, I will transcribe this into you. So this adds also another error. However, when we add contextual biasing, which is the context that we've seen with GPT, we get a word error rate of 27%. Now, there is no extra training that's happening here. There's nothing. This is free performance that we're getting by just giving it context that would be ready on any teacher's desk. We're going from 23% to 27%, which is an improvement of 6% absolute improvement. Now, if you compare this to fine-tuning, without any contextual biasing, the same prompt, these two models, but we're doing fine-tuning. This is LoRa adaptation just on the LLM component. So we're not adapting the acoustic model or the acoustic encoder. We're only adapting the LLM using LoRa. The performance is 25%. Now notice how close these two numbers are. In the event that we want to develop something for a different acoustic domain where we don't have any data, contextual biasing can perform very close to actual fine-tuning. However, if we do have fine-tuning data, both together is better. So we have fine-tuning plus contextual biasing. We see a performance of 22.47%. So this is the best performance that we get with the LLM-based model. However, if we compare this to the best wave-to-vec model that we have, which we've done continued pre-training and weekly supervised pre-training, remember the word error rate was 13%, which is about 10% absolute word error rate points better than the wave-to-vec model, even with fine-tuning. The reason why this happens is that the issue in classrooms is not that the classroom speech is challenging linguistically. Classroom speech is challenging acoustically. And even when we fine-tune here, we're not fine-tuning the acoustic encoder. The reason for this is that when we use LoRa, we use specific recipes that didn't allow us to adapt the acoustic encoder. So wave-to-vec, when we do continued pre-training is happening without any labels. So there's no linguistic adaptation happening here. It's purely acoustic adaptation. And we do weekly supervised pre-training, we're doing acoustic and linguistic adaptation. So wave-to-vec model is a very strongly adapted acoustic model specifically to the classroom domain. And this is more important in the classroom domain than a much bigger and much stronger language model that is an order of magnitude larger. Okay, so to conclude our findings in this research, we see that state-of-the-art ASR degrades in low-resource acoustically adverse domain. We've seen this with the wave-to-vec model that achieves like 3 to 4% in general benchmarks, but is 28% in classrooms. And we've seen this with the LLM models. And we've seen that large-scale gold standard data collection is often infeasible. We tried to do that. We tried to retranscribe data without even any collection. And it took us about a year and thousands of dollars to transcribe 13 hours. And if we just rely solely on labeled data, this doesn't scale. Good data economy requires us to use every part of the data that we can. To use the unlabeled data, to use the weekly labeled data, and to use the gold standard data. Self-supervised model enables flexible adaptation. Now, we have done experiments with Whisper, which is, as an off-the-shelf model, is often better than wave-to-vec. But Whisper doesn't allow us to train on unlabeled data. Self-supervised models allow us to use every part of the data, the unlabeled data, the weekly labeled data, and the strongly labeled data, which actually makes it outperform Whisper. So we can do continued pre-training, which actually gives us the biggest boost in performance. And we also can do weekly supervised pre-training. Acoustic modeling in challenging English settings, it is more important than strong linguistic modeling. Domain-adapted acoustic models outperform larger LLM-based ASR. So the linguistic capacity at all is insufficient under acoustic adversary. Now, what are the limitations of this research? Well, every number that we have, every result that we have has a big asterisk that we have a very small test set that is about 3 hours long. And the diversity of this test set is limited by the size of the test set, and the size is limited by just the size of the data that we have. We're still in low resource. So acoustic robustness remain underexplored across conditions. We tried to make this test set as diverse as possible. We had good racial diversity within this test set. We have good acoustic diversity in this test set, but it's still coming only from 4 classes. Despite large gains, performance remained below production quality. We said that we want the performance to be under 10%. We're still at 13.5%. Now, this work addresses ASR in isolation. If you want to deploy this model in production, we want diarization, which tells us what was said when and which speaker said it, and speaker ID, which identifies specifically which speaker. Now, before we go into future research, this is a direction that we explored that we just didn't have time to delve into in this presentation, which is actually it's based on one of your papers, which used biomimetic front ends for speech models. We wanted to have a speech inversion front end for wave2vec. What we arrived at is that we had a multi-task approach, that we have a speech inversion layer. And what speech inversion does is that it goes from the acoustic signal of speech into a signal of speech that describes how the vocal tract moves during the speech. So it describes the constriction at the lips, the tongue tip, and the tongue body. So this is one task. And then the ASR task learns by positive transfer. But you also feed the track variables, the vocal track variables, back into the ASR pass for CTC. Results show that this is really useful in low resources, but it doesn't translate well into classrooms and adversarial acoustic conditions.
I would imagine you need phone level sort of labeling for something like this to actually work, not because the signals here, what is produced is a sequence of phones, not necessarily words kind of a thing.
Well, the very cool thing about wave2vec and CTC is that it does that implicitly. So what wave2vec does is that it partitions the audio signal into 20 millisecond chunks, and then it classifies each chunk into a grapheme. So it does phone level transcription implicitly by doing the 20 millisecond chunks. But the limitation that we have is that at the time that we did this, so we did pseudo labels of speech inversion because we wanted to do it on large ASR systems. So we had pre-trained speech inversion systems generate the labels.
Is this published by the way?
It is under review currently at Interspeech. But the speech inversion models that we use for pseudo labeling were not suitable for noise. Now we have that. So this is also another direction in future work.
Very interesting.
Thank you. I mean, these are the papers that we published in speech inversion, and this is the paper that we have for under free. It's on archive currently. This is the work. And I also have some results that I can show you if you're interested. Okay, so for future direction, there is something that we can do about the limitation about the test set. There is currently a center here at UMD, it's called ETSI, that's working on this exact problem. And they have collected and transcribed a larger classroom data set, about 200 hours. It's still within low resources. Remember, we had in high resources, it's tens of thousands of hours. But we have 200 hours that we can validate these models on and possibly also train on a portion of that. So this actually might very well push us towards the 10% threshold just by the virtue of having more data. Below 10%, yes. Just by virtue of having more data. Another thing is, we've compared strong acoustic modeling versus strong linguistic modeling. Why can't we have both? Well, actually, in late 2025, Meta, which first developed wave2vec, have released a wave2vec-based model that is integrated with LLMs. So there is an opportunity to use our own wave2vec acoustic model and integrate it with the LLMs.
Is that the SAM stuff?
It's omnilingual ASR. So we actually also have some results from omnilingual ASR. It is very promising that the LLM integration really helps. So we can combine strong acoustic modeling with strong linguistic modeling. We also can extend these insights into diarization and speaker identification. Now the good news is the diarization models and the speaker identification models often use speech encoders that exactly like wave2vec speech encoders. So the insights can translate directly. And this would move the model from what was said to who said what and when. Okay, so this is it. And before I move on to the many people that I need to thank for this research, I have to take a moment to dedicate this work to Hind Rajab. Hind was a 5-year-old Palestinian girl. She should be alive. She should be in school. She should be benefiting from this research and from the technology that we're developing. But she's not. This dissertation is about making sure that the technology works for everybody, but the reality is it doesn't. In Arabic, we usually call children the beloved of the merciful, which is the merciful is one of the names of God, and Habib al-Rahman. And we say that because in every culture, the social the contract necessitates that children are shown unconditional mercy, but the reality on the ground that it is not. If you don't know her story, just please remember her name and look it up. I hope that her voice and her story is a beacon for all of us to make sure that we can do whatever we can, that children are shown mercy, and they get to live in safety or prosperity, or at the very least that they get to live. And I want to thank the many people who made this research possible. First off, I want to thank Carol. The picture that you have on the website is the low resolution, so I wanted to use this picture. Well, over the past few years, you've been this is a recent picture. You've been a tremendous mentor, and you are an incredible researcher, and I'm privileged to have worked under you. But more than that, you've been a tremendous friend. And I am very lucky to have learned from you. You've taken me from a semi-clueless undergrad to the researcher that I am today, so I'm very grateful for you. I'm also grateful for the Defense Committee panel, those who are here and those who are on Zoom. Professor Carol, Professor Shihab, Sangamitra, Dinesh, and Professor Romani. Thank you for giving me your time, and later on, thank you for giving me your feedback, and I appreciate really your time. I also want to thank my PI, Professor Jing Liu, who is the director of ETSI, who has literally made this research possible. I also want to thank collaborators from Stanford University, Professor Dora Demsky and Dr. Lope. Professor Dora has given us access to the NLP cluster at Stanford, which all of this training happened on that. And a lot of the breakthroughs in this research happened through conversation with Dr. Lope, so I'm very grateful for that. I want to also thank my colleagues at SCL. This is when Nina took us out to lunch. Not everybody in this picture, and not everybody I think is in this room. But it's been a privilege to work alongside you and to call you my colleagues, so thank you very much. I also want to thank my friends at UMD. Now, one of the things about guy groups that we don't take any pictures. So this picture is literally maybe 2 weeks old, one of the late night trivia nights. In Egypt, we call people like me strangers because we are strangers in a strange land. We're a different country. But nights like these, I felt less so like the strangers. So I'm very grateful to everybody of you, Ashri, Atwa, Marwan, Hazim, Faisal, who's here, came from New York, and Muhammad, who's not here, and many people that I forgot, but I'm grateful for everybody. Thank you. I also want to thank my friends in Egypt. These people I haven't seen in many years and are thousands of miles away, but they're a big part of this journey, and I'm very thankful for them. I want to thank my family, my parents, who have instilled from a very young age the importance of education and science and discipline. And also my siblings, Muhammad and Minna. Muhammad is also a PhD from the University of Arizona, and Minna is a dentist. They set the standard that I'm kind of forced to have to follow, being the youngest. So thank you. I also want to thank my never-ending patient wife, Nada, who's right here. Being married to a PhD student, I think, is one of the most difficult things. But being married to an international PhD student is more difficult. If I'm a stranger, she's also a stranger in this land. She has left friends and family back home in Egypt to follow this dream that I have. And this is as much her moment as it is mine. So thank you a lot. Thank you. And lastly, this guy who's a late addition, Yassine. I am very proud of this research. I am very proud to be here, but I'm endlessly more proud to be his dad. And I just hope that I can do something to make him as proud to be my son that I am proud to be his dad. And he's here, but he doesn't understand a word. He just wants to go play.
Half of us.
Yeah. But I hope one day he gets to understand how important he is to me. And yeah, this is it. Thank you. Okay, questions?
Yeah, questions from the audience?
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I learned a lot. So first, I find myself thinking about the protected environment where all of this research is happening. There might be reasons to have the recording system, the ASR system, the processing system, everything in one closed space. So in terms of requirements, in terms of GPU requirements, hardware, do you think that that would be something that we can build?
So
without calling to a cloud and having it run locally and running everything in a closed system and protecting our data?
this is an excellent question. So for training, this.
Anna, can you just repeat the question? Some of the people.
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah, it's okay. So if I understand your question correctly, there is a need, at least for deployment, that all of this is in one place, in local. Basically, it's not going to the cloud. So we're recording in the classroom, and then we don't want to go to the cloud to process this. And this is an excellent question because at least for training, we actually need substantial GPUs to train this model. But this is the same model that Google uses for their Gboard speech-to-text. So this can run on pretty low-end GPUs. After it goes through the distillation and the quantization and everything, this actually can run pretty much in real time with pretty high quality, similar to the Gboard. And this was intentional that we use this model. And this is one actually of the good comparisons to LLMs. So the LLM model, it's very difficult to run on phones. Maybe it can, but it will be pretty substantial in battery, and we have to do a lot of quantization that will give a big hit to the performance. But there is already a good tech stack to use the wave-to-vec models on phones via the Gboard app. Yeah. Sure.
So one of the use cases that we've been exploring has been group conversations. So multiple parallel conversations happening at the same time in a classroom, right? So when we have a challenge like that, are there any recommendations that you can make for how we can use enhanced ASR systems to track group chat?
Yes. 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 So there's a substantial research into multi-source ASR. The issue with this research is that it uses microphone arrays, which usually are from the same space and just capturing the same thing. But this research can be extended directly into multiple microphone ASR that is distributed around the room that will capture different parts of the conversation. And this is also a project that I actually wanted to work on, but I was sidetracked by other projects. But yes, you can have so wave-to-vec is a convolution encoder and a transformer encoder. You can have different convolution encoders that are capturing different parts from different microphones that all feed to the same transformer decoder or encoder, and that could potentially help this. In other words, multi-source ASR is the solution, and it can extend directly to wave-to-vec.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. Any questions from the room? Okay.
Okay, well, this is now where you guys leave.